Welcome to Smart Career Planning, a podcast that discusses anything and maybe everything that goes into planning a smart career journey. I'm your host, Helen Chow. Welcome to our 12th episode. This podcast is brought to you by Interview Right Consulting. Interview Right Consulting is my own career and interview coaching practice. If you've been enjoying the content I put out in my podcast or even my LinkedIn profile, please do check out my website at interviewrightconsulting.com. Check out what I do and check out the articles I write. Now, the title of this podcast is Why Should You Put Yourself Out There? If you've been following my podcast, you can go back to podcast maybe 2 or maybe 3, which I talked extensively about the reasons why anyone should put themselves out there for obvious reasons. Number 1, you don't know what you get until you put yourself out there. And number 2, you can be connected with great people. Just a great way to be connected or to connect with other people. Now, for those of you who don't know too much about me, I have 2 businesses. One is my headhunting business. I work with different startup companies, technology companies, and help them scale their operations, more specifically sales and marketing roles. They are my specialties. And the other business, the one I just talked about, Interview Right Consulting. I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I've been very afraid. I was very afraid when I started out. I've always been a safe person. I've never been this brave person where I quit my job and just be an entrepreneur. I'm just, I want to say I'm extremely responsible, but I'm just a very scared person. So the way I came across entrepreneurship is extremely serendipitous. I started out Actually, after I graduated from school, I started out teaching. I spent a couple of years teaching. And then after that, I did recruitment in the nonprofit industry, did it for 4.5 years. Long story short, with the advance of technologies, I think about 9 years or 8 years after I graduated, people no longer had to just put their resumes on Craigslist or on Monsters. There are a lot more portals for you to put your information out there. So I put my information out on Indeed, and by then I had already done teaching, had already done recruitment for the nonprofit sector, had already done executive nursing recruitment, had already done sales recruitment in the arbitrage industry, more specifically trading semiconductor manufacturing equipment. And so after I put my resume out there, someone reached out to me and he said to me, Helen, I see that you have experience in the arbitrage space or arbitrage industry. I know that you know perfect way to find the right people. So I would love to either have you work for me to do arbitrage and do trading, or I would love to have you recruit for me on the side. Would you be open to that? And that was the first step of me jumping out of the plane and becoming an entrepreneur, because I responded back to him and I said, this is perfect timing. I would love to work with you. Just give me 2 days. I'll send you contract day number 3. That's what I did. And that's how I started my own recruitment business. It's called Accenture Recruiting. It's been 4 years now, and I've been doing really, really well. Now, one thing about recruitment industry, or it could be this is just me, I look for very specific things in a candidate, because to me, my responsibility is to my clients. They are paying me 20% to find just the right candidate for them. So I don't send them a lot of candidates, but the ones I send them, they are really, really good. They have either domain experience or extensive experience, a little bit more than what they ask for. They're worth anyone's 20%, if not even 30% of the base salary. Needless to say, I do say no to candidates a lot because I want to make sure that I'm just finding that right person for them. Now, if you're someone like me that is really particular in the way I look at things and like I put everything in a box, that kind of mindset, that's something to use. Especially for me, the more no I say, I feel like it's changing me on the inside to the point that I began to hate myself. I hated saying no, but I just couldn't change. So rather than not being happy as a headhunter, why not develop a business where it can help people? I have 10 years of experience by now in identifying the right candidates. I hunt people online, offline all the time. I sell opportunities. I interview people all day long. Why don't I leverage this 10 years of experience to develop something where I can empower job seekers with, what is the right way to build your career? How do you interview better? How do you create this strong online presence? How do you create this chemistry on the phone with a potential employer? How should you carry yourself? How do you do research? So I put all of that together and developed this new business, Interview Right Consulting. Why did I talk about this? It's because if you don't put yourself out there, you don't know all the doors that will be opened up to you. So right now, I only have 2 businesses, and I do see myself, either one of those businesses may pivot, or I may build another business depending on who I'm going to meet and people I'm talking with. So this is a really exciting time for me. That's why I want to talk about this. It all started out with me putting myself out there. The second reason, which is a little bit more subtle, it is self-improvement. I write a lot of content, both my hiring business and also for the career coaching business. And I remember a couple of times where people come. Of course, there are a lot of people that would thank me for the free content I'm producing and I'm sharing with them. But I remember distinctly there are people who would email me and say, Hal, I remember distinctly this one person. She said that the content, it's really meaningful. They're extremely strong, good thought leadership material, but my writing it's just not good enough. And she notices my grammatical mistakes and syntactic mistakes, and some of the phrases are a bit awkward. If you are not noticing my accent, English is really not my first language, and it shows sometimes in my writing. And so the feedback that she gave me was extremely constructive. She said, you have great content, but at the same time, it can be clouded out by some of the grammatical mistakes. So she suggested me to have someone professionally take a look at it. So that's what I've been doing. All of my content, I have a professional proofreader go through it. If you notice any grammatical mistakes, please let me know. Then I'm going to go back to the person and say, hey, I pay you to fix my mistakes. What's going on? So that's number one. And number two, when it comes to self-improvement, and this is sort of a side note, podcasting has really changed the way I communicate. You may think, or I used to think, that I talk to people all day long. Of course, I'm a great communicator. And I always think there's nothing wrong with my communication. I'm able to communicate complex thoughts because I have to describe positions, I have to ask questions all the time. And so I never really judge myself or think that I may have a communication problem until I start listening to myself via my podcast. And I noticed very, very subtle things. It started out with, of course, listening to your own voice. It's just horrible. I hated that experience at the beginning. But then I started changing the way I look at the whole situation. I started thinking, what can I just a little bit different each time? And that's when I realized, very subtle way, there are times when I'm just a little bit nervous. I tend to give out a little bit more information than necessary, which makes me come across a little bit more awkward than I'd like. So that's one of the things. And number two is, especially in the beginning, when I was less confident of a communicator, especially via podcast, my voice I don't project well. And I can imagine how that kind of communication style can affect the way I interview people. So it was a really great learning lesson for me. I'm not saying that all of you should have a podcast, but I strongly recommend you, especially if you would be going through interviews, or even if you drive a lot, I definitely recommend you to start recording what you say to people. Or maybe even when you have an interview, record it. And you can really get a sense of the back and forth exchange, hear your own voice, hearing the way you answer questions, and see if there are ways that you can improve, whether it be nerves, the way you phrase sentences, what kind of information you're releasing, or what kind of information you're not releasing. It's extremely helpful for me. That's number 2, self-improvement. Number 3, when you put yourself out there, it really trains you to think of a higher cost than just you. Now, what I find is, whether it be me needing help from other people, for myself, for my own business, trying to promote my business, people, really kind-hearted people, for the first time, when you ask them for help, even when you ask them for help, it's like, hey, I am in the market, I'm looking for a job. Kind-hearted people, they're like, oh, I will help you. Let me talk with people in my network. But then in time, you're going to exhaust that pool of kind-hearted individuals when all you do is just keep asking them to help you. Now, when you put yourself out there, why should you put yourself out there? Because it trains you to think of a higher cost than just you. What I find is someone will want to help you find a job or refer you to a new job opportunity because two reasons. Number one, they know you will make them look great if they refer you. Or number two, they're extremely altruistic and they just want to help. But bottom line is those two motivations can only be recycled X number of times. At some point, you will hit a limit and you will see people in your network less and less willing to help, or they may be less responsive to your requests. So that's why you need to think of a higher cost when you put yourself out there. So say, for example, if you have a side project or you have a great idea, rather than you talking about how much you need help in building out your career, you can talk about, hey, I have this side projects. I noticed you have X, Y, and Z experience. I think you'd be a really great help to this project. Would you be interested in grabbing coffee for 20 minutes? Or maybe you can say, hey, I'm part of this nonprofit organization and we have this event going on. I noticed that you have extensive event experience or you're really well connected. Can I treat you out for coffee and we can talk about this event I have coming up? I think I can definitely use your help here. So anything just besides you, if there's a cost, if there's a reason for you to reach out to people, inviting people to collaborate with you, it is a great way to meet people. And again, it is just a good way for you to showcase your talents, how well-rounded you are without you just keep talking about yourself all the time. I'm going to wrap up the podcast here. Well, I hope you enjoy this podcast so far. So I've talked about 3 major reasons why you should put yourself out there. You don't know what you'll get, and if you don't put yourself out there, self-improvement, and it really trains you to think of a higher cost than just you. Well, I hope you enjoy this podcast. If you do, please do hit subscribe. If you have any questions about my service or about what I'm saying here, feel free to reach out to me at helen@interviewrightconsulting.com. 2 announcements. Number 1, I have a webinar coming up titled 4 Silent Killers in a Job Interview. For those of you who are interested in signing up, you can visit my website at interviewrightconsulting.com/services under webinar. You'll be able to find this webinar. You can sign up for the one on July 29th. It is at 8:30 a.m. Pacific. The second announcement is my career clinic. I have it every other Friday. You can sign up by visiting my website at interviewrightconsulting.com. It's called Friday Career Clinic. Please do sign up. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoy speaking with all of you. Have a great day, and I will see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye now.